When you have an older quarterback, there are some things that just need to be there for them. When you have an older quarterback, there are some limitations that they have just due to their age and wear and tear on their body. And there are some things that are imperative that you have just for them to be the best that they can be. One of them is a solid offensive line. When you have an older quarterback, it's important to have a solid offensive line because your mobility isn't necessarily there. You might be smarter, but your mobility isn't there. It's also smart to have some stability. It's very smart to have some stability in the front office. And that brings me to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The older quarterback in question is Aaron Rodgers. And in talking about this Pittsburgh Steelers team, I want them, and I feel like it is important for them to look at the New York Jets a year ago. And essentially, what happened to the New York Jets a year ago, and how they had so much promise. They had so much expectations that essentially weren't reached. When you look at that Jets team, as much money as they put in the offensive line, it wasn't good. They had one of the worst offensive lines in football, which then made the job much harder for Aaron Rodgers because he didn't have the mobility. While he is smart, he didn't have the mobility, and he didn't have the time to essentially get the ball to his top targets, i.e. Devontae Adams, i.e. Garrett Wilson. On top of that, and because the offensive line was so bad, that neutralized the running game. So Breece Hall wasn't much of a factor last year. On top of that, because the offense wasn't that good, the defense was on the field much longer than it should have been, which caused a lot of lapses in defense. On top of the fact that you fired Robert Saleh mid-season, which just completely derailed not just the defense, but essentially the entire team. It was a cluster of poor decisions that essentially affected the end result for the New York Jets. While no, I'm not overall comparing the Pittsburgh Steelers organization to the New York Jets organization. That would be disrespectful to the Steelers. The Steelers have a lot of things that you may not like about them, but they're not a dumb organization. Or, let me not disrespect the Jets. The Steelers make smarter decisions, it feels like. However, the Steelers find themselves almost in the same position as the New York Jets. You have an older quarterback. Ironically, it is Aaron Rodgers. And it's not just with an older quarterback. Let me first say that. I think the most important position group on a football team is the line, the offensive line. If you do not have an offensive line, as we've seen several times, in fact, We saw that on display almost weekly with the Houston Texans last year. Their offensive line was so bad, and you saw just how bad C.J. Stroud looked. You saw just how bad that offense looked, even with the weapons that they had. I know that they dealt with injuries, but their offensive line was terrible. So I believe that, yes, you can have your quarterback is the most important position, but the most important position group is the offensive line. Especially when you have an older quarterback that is not the most mobile. And that's my issue with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You bring in Aaron Rodgers, which I'm not mad at that decision. If you feel like Aaron Rodgers is the person to get it done, and Russell Wilson's not, and Justin Fields is not, who obviously they both let walk, that's fine. But I feel like we should be honest. I understand that the biggest thing that fans look at is the wins column and loss column. It doesn't matter what you have. It's just, what did you produce in the wins and what did you produce in the loss? And they look at, Justin Fields, and they look at Russell Wilson, and they said, oh, they were just terrible. They had flashes, but those flashes didn't amount to nothing. Okay. I don't hear many people talk about how bad the offensive line was for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mind you, we're talking about two quarterbacks that are more mobile than Aaron Rodgers. And as we look today, I think the offensive line is still not good. I'm looking at this. The offensive line is not great. And I fear that it's not good enough to give Aaron Rodgers the time. Look, I understand what you did. I understand you going out getting a DK Metcalf. I understand you going out and even trading away George Pickens. I even understand paying T.J. Watt. It's kind of like the foundation, When you're a team that is built on something, it's not, I understand the inability to want to divert from the norm. So I get it. I think that there are some good pieces on this team. I know you lost Najee Harris, but you got Jaylen Warren, you got Pat Freiermuth, and obviously the defense is still loaded. But what's interesting is that this team, this Pittsburgh Steelers team, is showing, or it looks eerily similar to that New York Jets team a year ago. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to finish the same way. When you have someone as great as Aaron Rodgers, I don't expect you to finish poorly. Not to mention, we all know that Mike Tomlin non-losing season streak has to continue. But you have Aaron Rodgers, who was on both teams. You have both teams that looks like their offensive line isn't going to be that good. Both teams that are defensive-led. But if your offense isn't producing, and you can't say that their offense didn't have pieces, because, again, you had Garrett Wilson, you brought in Devontae Adams, and Breece Hall. My thing is this, too. Aaron Rodgers already come out and said more than likely this is going to be his last year, which is why he signed a one-year deal. which means that you're essentially going all out. I just fear that it's not enough. In the great words of Kendrick Lamar, it's not enough. Because I don't. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of options for Aaron Rodgers, seeing as what happened last year. But you might have chose the worst division to have that last run. And I was very vocal when it happened. And again, I'm all for players getting their money, so I think TJ Watt should have got the money. But I also think it would have been in the best interest of the Pittsburgh Steelers to trade TJ Watt because you can get a haul for him. He's still one of the best defensive players in the league. But obviously they paid TJ Watt. They stuck to the norm. They stuck to having a staunch defense going into the season, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my thing is this. Okay, you pay TJ Watt, one of the highest paid non-quarterbacks in league history. Cool. What else do you have? You have DK Metcalf. Cool. In fact, let me back up. Did you get the most important, in my opinion, did you get the most important position group in order? And in my opinion, no. In my opinion, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to struggle mightily because their offensive line isn't great. They're going to be in a bunch of games because their defense is that good, but that's usually what. And now I'm hearing what Cameron Hayward might not even play because he's trying to get a new deal. I think he's 36, trying to get a new deal, which I respect. At the end of the day, because of everything that I just laid out as far as the construction of the team and the fact that you're in essentially the hardest division in football, I think that this season will end in disappointment for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it kind of opens a new thought realm for me. Aaron Rodgers is a bona fide first ballot Hall of Famer. Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterback, just pure talent-wise, we've ever seen. For the longest, he was number one as far as just pure talent until that number 15 in Kansas City came on the scene. So Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest talents we've ever seen at the quarterback position. When you're a Hall of Fame player, you don't want it to end ugly. And usually it doesn't end ugly. Yeah, you might have a bad season, but it doesn't end ugly. It's no question that Aaron Rodgers' tenure in New York as a Jet was ugly. From the everything on the field, the injury, the Aaron Rodgers documentary, it was just ugly. I'm not blaming the lack of success from New York just on Aaron Rodgers, but it was ugly. My thought process is what happens if Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback that breaks Mike Tomlin's non-losing record regular season? Which, if you look at their schedule and you look at just this division could very well be the case. That's just something to think about, man. That would be yet another stain on an otherwise Hall of Fame legacy. So it's just something to think about. And I hope it doesn't happen, but that would be like, I'm not saying just completely wipe out the legacy, but it would be a blemish. Another blemish, because I think everything that happened with the Jets is a blemish. It would be another blemish on the legacy that is Aaron Rodgers being the first quarterback, mind you. And that's something that we talk about a lot on this podcast, just how poor the quarterback room has been for the Pittsburgh Steelers since Big Ben left. So the fact that you, by name, are the best quarterback that arguably they've ever had, might I add. Just by name, Aaron Rodgers is probably the best quarterback the Pittsburgh Steelers have ever had. You also being the one quarterback that ends Mike Tomlin's non-losing season streak would be insane. I just feel you're banking a lot on a player that hasn't had a great season for the last, 3-4 seasons? On top of that, he is, I think, the oldest quarterback in the league and has one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Not the worst, but not good either. Oh, man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.